Good morning, everybody. All right, so that was a perfect lead-in, great presentation, and you're going to hear a lot of parallels between what you just heard and what I'm about to talk about. But before we get there, we want to talk for just a minute to the locals. You all who are anybody from the Boston area, from Massachusetts, will be familiar with the concept of a turnpike, and specifically familiar with the concept of the Massachusetts Turnpike, or the Mass Pike as it's known locally, or as it's often also known, the longest known parking lot in the world. All right, so the Mass Pike was built in the 1950s, and the idea of the turnpike was to speed people throughout the state, to get from one end of the state to the other quickly. The idea was to make it possible for commerce to be transacted more efficiently throughout the state. But because turnpikes had been around for a while, there was a basic fundamental flaw in how this process worked. And it was a misalignment between how you pay to get on this road that's going to speed you from one place to another, and what you're actually trying to do. So what you're trying to do is get from place to place quickly. So when the Mass Pike was inaugurated, it was a ticketing system. You bought your ticket in advance, you got it punched at the toll plaza, and that's just fine, except of course a lot of people who decide they want to get on the highway don't have a ticket, and so they show up at the toll plaza, and there's a complex financial transaction that has to take place. So that slows things down a little bit. So at some point they just said, well, you know what, forget the tickets, let's just have everybody have a complex financial transaction at the toll plaza. And so that ends up in a lot of backup at the toll plazas. Now, technology came along, and this technology helped align this basic vision of the turnpike, speedy transportation, a little bit better with what you had to do to get on it. So now you could throw coins into this basket if you happen to have the right kinds of coins. Of course, in my experience as a kid, I grew up in New Hampshire, not far away. Coming on the Mass Pike, one of the things that we always wanted to do as a kid is be the one who got to throw the coins. But we quickly found out that whenever you see a kid's arm coming out the window, that meant that you weren't going to be going through the toll plaza anytime soon. Those folks would be getting out of their car to find their coins. People also like to throw all kinds of tokens, laundromat tokens, those kinds of things in there. So that didn't work very well. So it really wasn't until quite recently that finally the payment system, the way you get onto the turnpike, started to be aligned with what it was actually supposed to be doing, which is speeding you on through. So now that we have Easy Pass, and particularly in those places where there's only Easy Pass and augmented by taking a picture of your license plate, we actually get to zoom right through this, and the traffic backups that existed are much less likely to occur. Unless you're on the Spalding Turnpike, where I was a couple days ago, in which case they still occur because there's a bunch of people who still pay with cash. But it's really about aligning the experience that is associated with the vision for this thing with the actual experience of being on it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. The fact that the journey in B2B is not a seamless one. It's not a seamless one from the perspective of your buyer, and it's not a seamless one from the perspective of your sales teams. And the reason for that is that we have both the wrong vehicle that we're transporting our potential opportunities with, and we have the wrong highway to put them on. So let's talk about that. First of all, the incompatible revenue vehicle problem. So at Serious Decisions, we do a lot of research. Some of the research we've most recently done asked B2B buyers who were recently part of a B2B purchase, how big was that team that you were on that made the purchase? So we found that 27% of our respondents said they were part of a team that was 6 to 10 or more people. And that's for enterprise kind of solution likely that they were buying. We call that a committee buying group. Another 51% were part of consensus committees, so 3 to 5 people helping to make a decision for their organization. And then just 22% were part of a buying group that was either just one person or maybe it was two people. So we've got different size groups, and it's really important to understand that. It's also important to understand that all of the people in that group, so we surveyed all different kinds of individuals with different kinds of buyer roles, and on average, they have 42 interactions with sellers. And those 42 interactions are both human and digitally mediated. The thing is, our systems and processes behave as if, act as if, all of the transactions were conducted with individuals. Our marketing automation, our Salesforce automation systems are really designed for systems that are for buying processes that are run by individuals. So we've got an incompatibility there. To illustrate why this is such an important incompatibility, we want to play a little game. And if you've played this game before, don't shout out yet. All right, so first, we're going to look at 3 potential opportunities, and I want you to think about which ones your salespeople would be most excited about getting first. On this first one, we've got a potential opportunity, so it's decent account, somebody with a decent relevant title, and you've got an MQL. Right? And that MQL means that somebody's scored up enough to get sent off to your SDR sales team. The second one is same kind of organization, same kind of person, but you've got a second person. Now, this second person hasn't done very much. They haven't met your scoring threshold yet, so they're not being sent to anybody, but you've got a second one there. And then there's a third one. And the third one is you've got 4 people who come from a company that seems like a decent company. They all have relevant titles, but none of them has done very much. They haven't scored up to become an MQL in your system or process yet. All right, so raise your hand if you think your sales team would like to know about the 4 inquiry opportunity first. Okay, that's a bunch of hands. How about the one in the middle, 1 MQL? How many people have broken arms currently in the room? All right, I'm going to say, I didn't see very many hands at all, but I've done this a few dozen times. So I'm going to assume that most of you understood that the right answer is this one. Right? To know that there are 4 people with decent regular titles that you're interested in from a target account, and they're on your website now looking at your content, that's an incredible signal. And if you ask a salesperson which one, by the way, if you go back and talk to your salespeople, make sure you told them you picked this one, right? Some people will pick the middle one because they'll say, well, there was one person who was really all excited, but nobody ever picks the one over on the left. But here's the thing. In our systems today, these 2 over on the left, I got that right? Yep, over on the left, look exactly the same. And when I say they look exactly the same, what I'm saying is you're never going to send the inquiry to somebody until that becomes an MQL. So if I were to look at this today, my sales team or my SDR team is only going to see the ones on the left, and they look exactly alike. They're not exactly alike. You've got 2 people from one and one from the other. And you're not going to see the third one at all. Right? So if you're doing this today, and there's a really, really good chance you are, and you're in marketing, do not tell anybody about it until you fix it. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so we call this thing that you just saw, we call this buying group blindness. In other words, your systems and processes can't see that there's a buying group on your website, in your content, paying attention. And this is a big problem. All right, so we've got a vehicle for one, and that is the lead object, and that is the source of all evil right now in the system. It's the reason that you're buying group blind. And we're going to talk about why that is such a big problem. Right, so imagine that you're trying to take that single vehicle, that single occupant vehicle onto the mass pike. Well, if it's a motorcycle, you can do it, but if it's a scooter like this, you certainly can't. In your systems today, what you have is a system in which you've got individual people who show up at the toll plaza, and somehow magically they've got to turn into opportunities when they get to the other side. That's what's happening today. This is a great picture. So when they opened the Mass Turnpike, they had a bunch of people walk up to it. That's exactly what it looks like on your website right now. And then you've got a bunch of cars on the other side. So we need to fix that, because what we need to understand is that the people coming to your website are already part of buying groups. We just don't know that, and we don't see that in our systems today. The fact that we don't causes all kinds of problems. All kinds of incompatibilities exist. We fight over which lead was first. We fight over which ones marketing can get credit for. Sales will even tell you, if I've got a lead from that account, don't go into that account anymore. Don't get any more leads. That's also nuts. All right, so there's another problem with this, which is that it just doesn't work very well the way we do it right now. So we just heard about this a little bit, but here's the details of it. You know, our waterfalls begin with leads, and the thing is, we can set our goals according to leads. We can say, well, I know I need 5,000 leads to get my 25 opportunities, but knowing that you need to get 5,000 leads doesn't tell you that there are 5,000 leads out there to even get, right? It doesn't tell you anything about what is possible. So we don't have a reference to what's possible when we do that. The other thing is, if we think of buying signals as if we think of our hand raisers as buying signals, of our leads as buying signals, the problem is they're really, really not very good signals, right? So in most B2B organizations, the conversion rate from an inquiry at the top of the waterfall all the way down to close won business is substantially less than 1 in 100. It's often 0.5% or 1/4%. So not good. Those odds are really, really not good. There's more to the problem. It gets a little bit worse. So here we have somebody in our revenue vehicle. We have somebody that we think of as a lead. We often think of it as just that one person, when in fact there's actually 2 people in the car at least all the time. In fact, there probably are more people than that, right? So we need to be seeing all of the people in our revenue vehicle, in our potential opportunity. The thing is, after we get a lead from the first person, we often act as if that second person, that second lead that we get, doesn't exist. We call this second lead syndrome. We have cute names for everything. Second lead syndrome, think about this. Do this thought experiment for your own company right now. If you get a lead from a great account today, and that lead gets sent off to your SDR, and your SDR gets really lucky and qualifies them as an opportunity, or qualifies them, sends them off to sales, sales creates an opportunity. What happens when you get another really good lead from that same organization the next day? What happens to the life of that lead? Well, I can tell you that in about 70% of your organizations, what happens by policy and by practice is that about 70% of the time that lead is going to be killed on arrival. Your SDR is going to get it. They're going to go look to see that there was an opportunity already open for that. They're going to mark that lead as dead, or disqualified, or duplicate, some other thing that says this has no value. So we thought that the first lead that we got from this account was extremely valuable, and we jumped all over it. We got a second buying signal from the same account, and what do? We go, I don't care, right? Does that make any sense at all? Almost all of you are doing that, right? So go check in your systems today to see if you're doing that. One of the other things that's really important about understanding why that's such a bad practice is that we know that our buyers are groups of people working together. We know that there are multiple individuals. We also know that there are different buyer personas. We know that there are different roles in the buying process. And many of you have persona-based tactics that you use. You have content specifically designed for different ones of these individuals. And that's great. But what happens when they show up? If they show up and start consuming your content, you're going to ignore most of them. Does that make any sense? All right, you're probably doing that today. Please go change that, and we'll help you do that. All right, so today we see that we've got all kinds of leads showing up at our toll plaza. They look like disconnected individuals, but the fact of the matter is they're already organized into many, many, many buying groups. And those buying groups are opportunities. Those are the sales opportunities that your sales team needs. They exist in your data today. If you go back and look for them, you'll find them. All right, summing up so far, we know that buyers are teams of people and not individuals in the vast majority of cases, right? B2B marketing has been focused on leads, though, for a long time. Probably about 15 years, we've been very, very lead focused. And our systems today are a big part of the reason for that, and a big part of the reason that it's difficult to do anything else. But we'll talk about why you can and what you should do. All right, so my colleague liked to say this, time to pimp our ride. What does that mean? Well, we've got to have a different vehicle for our buying groups to ride in. And we have this thing that we call the demand unit. It's kind of a wonky name, but it's a really simple idea. There's a buying group, this team of people who do the buying from you, and they're organized around a need that their organization has, and that business need. And if they're not organized around a business need, then by definition, we don't care about them, right? But when they're organized around a business need and their job is to solve that business need, then we call them a demand unit. And a demand unit sounds like a really wonky name, but frankly, it's just a unit of demand, and that's what it is, right? This is the thing that we're looking for, what we want to identify, attract, engage, qualify, convert, and then ultimately retain as a customer. All right, so the interesting thing about these demand units is that they correspond really nicely to an object that we already have in our tech stacks, and that thing is an opportunity. All right, so really what we're saying is, we need to be going out and looking for potential opportunities. We need to identify where they might exist. That's the thing against which we set our goals. We don't set our goals against leads. How many potential opportunities are there, and how are we doing at attracting and engaging those potential opportunities? So if we're looking for potential opportunities, we can't do it with an old leads-based waterfall or leads-based funnel. We need something different. And that something different is what you see on the screen here today. Many of you will already be familiar with the demand unit waterfall, but this is really what it's for. It starts with a target, right? So we heard about that in the last talk, that we need to have a target. That target is potential opportunities. And we'll even say it's not really the account. Right? So if you sell 3 different things, and you could sell those 3 different things to each account that you care about, the number of potential opportunities is 3 times the number of accounts, and you better use that number and not the number of accounts when you're doing your planning. Active, who's out there looking? Right? Where do we see intent signals or other signals that tell us that one of those demand units we care about might actually be in market? Who's on our website engaging with us, giving us their name, inviting us to prospect with them? How many of those potential demand units should we prioritize for our human beings to conduct some outreach to, right? So we can use that time effectively. Our friends in sales said, but wait a minute, you know, all of the work that we do happens in just 2 small stages. So last year, earlier this year, what we did was said, you know, let's expand this out a little bit so we can see a little more clearly where those sales stages occur, and what about the customer journey as well. So within the qualified and pipeline stages, we have all of the sales stages that exist. And those are already there, but now we wanted to expand that out and show them. And then also the customer journey. For many of you, your customer operations are as or more important to your growth than new business. All right, so that's the demand unit waterfall. And the important thing about that is it allows us to have one single entity that we're tracking from the beginning to the end. And as we learn more about that entity, as we qualify it more, as we move it through our sales processes, we begin to learn more and more about it. And the really neat thing is, though, that we want to be able to have one single source of truth. We want to be able to look at this potential opportunity, any potential opportunity, see what's happening with that potential opportunity at any given time. And we want really the entire organization to be operating against the very same understanding of what the likelihood of us closing that opportunity is, of who's going to do what with that opportunity next. That's really what this process and system was set up to provide. All right, so if we're going to have this, and we think everybody should have this kind of opportunity-based system, then we're going to need to be much better aligned. And for us, revenue operations is about being much better aligned. So now we're going to get to that. Now, we've been talking about alignment forever, and we've been talking about alignment because it's a really critical part of how companies grow. And when we study this, we really see 3 big categories that cause organizations to grow. One is that you're in a market that's growing. And that is a big, big part of why your organization grows. It's really obvious, but it's important not to overlook the fact that you've got to be in the right place at the right time. The second is more internal. It's about how effectively you compete. It's about how efficiently you run your organization. And then there's alignment. Now, you might be asking, looking at this, why is he talking about alignment when the other 2 are much bigger? The reason that we're talking about alignment is that, one, it's very difficult to get your market to grow all by yourself. You may be able to do that, but that's pretty hard. That's moving mountains in our little metaphor here. Competitiveness and efficiency, you should absolutely be working on those things all the time. You can and you should change those, but oftentimes it takes a while to see the effect of those things. But you could go back to your office this afternoon and in 15 minutes talking with the head of sales if you're from marketing, or the head of marketing if you're from sales, you could be better aligned. and you could begin operating more efficiently right away. So that's why we focus a lot on this. Not only that, but we see when organizations are aligned, they operate much more effectively. Now, when we talk about what needs to be aligned, it's really important to understand what we're talking about. And we use the term revenue engine to describe these 4 parts of the organization: the product organization, the marketing organization, the sales organization, and the customer organization. And when these 4 things are in alignment, companies grow faster and are more profitable. And in fact, our data shows that they grow 19% faster and are 15% more profitable. Today, we're going to talk about revenue operations, and revenue operations entails the operational components of 3 of these: the marketing, the sales, and the customer organizations. All right, as we started to look at that this year, we went out and asked our friends at Lean Data, Insight Squared, and Outreach for some help surveying some folks, and we did that. And the results came back were kind of interesting. We asked, how aligned are you, your sales and your marketing organizations? And out of a scale of 5, where 5 is completely aligned, it came back 3.6. Sales and customer success, also 3.6. Marketing and customer success, 3.2. So collectively, what we said basically about our organizations was, meh, we're kind of aligned. Yeah, not great, not terrible, not great. So we need to do better. Why aren't we doing better? We've been talking about it for a long time. Well, there are a lot of forces that act on buyers and sellers that make it difficult to be in alignment and to stay in alignment. There are things that are changing all the time around us. We know that buyers are, the buyer journey is changing. We're becoming more customer-centric. The buying process is becoming more digitized and more complex. We know internally a lot of what's happening is we have lots of great tech, but it isn't always aligned. Sales is using different tech from marketing to solve the same kinds of problems very often, right? And so the answers that we get from those systems don't always align. And then there are these broader external factors as well. The rise of artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence is and should be changing how we engage with our buyers. One of the biggest changes, of course, in the last 10 or 15 years is this concept of a recurring revenue model, which really changes how organizations function. All right, so there are a lot of reasons that we're not aligned. So what do we need to do if we're going to get there? Well, there's 3 main components that we look at when we think about how to align the organization. And these 3 main components work together. Now, first, it starts with being strategically aligned. And that means that we share a vision and we share goals. And when we ask our audience or when we ask our clients about that, they tell us they're pretty well aligned when it comes to vision and goals. A lot of people, especially when we talk about revenue operations, want to jump directly to the organizational side of things. They want to say, okay, well, let's bring in a CRO and then everybody will work together better. Or let's merge our marketing or our sales ops teams and then everybody will work together. But alignment doesn't happen by osmosis. And the things that have to be aligned are these things in the middle, these operational components, the strategy, the planning, the infrastructure, the personnel, right? Data, measurement, all of these things have to be aligned. And for them to be aligned, you're going to have to do more than change your organization. And in fact, what we think is to get this intersection of all of these 3 major components of alignment, having a change in the organization is not the first place to go. The first place to go, and this is an eye chart, and you're welcome to take a picture of it and study it at home. We don't expect you to see those all right now. But the idea here is that within each of these areas of alignment, there are a number of key agreements that have to exist in the organization. And this, just looking at this, it's absolutely daunting to look at. But the thing is, you probably already got agreements in place for a lot of these. So I said it starts with visions and goals, and there's a really good chance that in your organization, you're pretty well aligned when it comes to the vision and goals for your company, for marketing and sales and customer. And you probably already have service level agreements between marketing and sales that work pretty well and exist and work pretty well. And you may have some other alignments that are in place as well that already work. So it is a daunting task, and we're here to help for sure. But this is what we need to do. So for all of our clients, for everybody out there, we think revenue operations is extremely important, but it doesn't mean that you change your organization. It means that you change how you interact with each other, and that may or may not require a change in the organization. So we actually went out and surveyed buyers and asked them if they have revenue operations functions or if they think of them that way, and then what does it look like? And what we found is 3 main models, and then of course a nothing at all. One we call the coalition of the willing, and that is where marketing operations, sales operations, and the customer operations teams come together, form a bunch of agreements about how they're going to operate, but don't necessarily merge as an organization. What everybody thinks about when they think about revenue operations is merging an organization that reports up into a central leader, a CRO or some other senior leader. And then there's another kind of centralized function where maybe the operations components get pulled out of marketing, sales, and customer altogether and report up into some other function like chief operating officer. So here's what we found. About 40% of organizations have what they think of as a coalition of the willing, organizations that are virtually aligned. They're aligned according to agreements that are in place. And this is perfectly fine. This is great. If you have these, if you put these agreements in place and they help you operate more effectively and more cohesively as a team, then that's perfect. Nothing wrong with that at all. Some organizations do go to a more centralized function. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you're not doing well as a company, where you have extremely difficult goals to meet over a relatively short period of time, it may mean that you need to have an organizational change to accomplish what you need to move things along faster. We do see kind of about the same amount of organizations that are somewhat centralized. And of course, a lot of organizations still today don't have anything that they would consider to be revenue operations. And there's a small slice, about 9%, where people essentially didn't understand what we were talking about. All right. So where does this start? First, we call this the great demand unit awakening, which means that's this lead-based system that you have in your organization today, where marketing's talking about leads and then they suddenly transform magically somehow into opportunities. We need to get past that. We need the entire organization thinking about buying groups, understanding how those buying groups show up on your website, in your data, at your events, and being able to react to them. The next thing we want to do is start to understand how we're going to market to these organizations. And if you're already doing ABM, if you're already doing some version of marketing to accounts, you've got a target set of accounts, if you already have persona-based tactics, then you're already well on the road to driving demand of buying groups. But what we need to be able to do is recognize those buying groups when we show up. And often that's going to take place in this interactions period, as we call it, where you start to recognize and connect those individual buyers before they get to sales. And then finally, in the age of revenue operations, where we have one end-to-end view, we have a demand unit waterfall where we can see those potential opportunities from the beginning of time all the way through their customer life cycle and their renewal cycle all the way through. Really simply, to put some meat on these bones, what we're seeing a lot of our clients do is change when an opportunity in the organization is created. And this is not a technically difficult thing to do. There's some cultural things that you need to work on typically to get this done. But if instead of qualifying a lead and sending a lead to sales, if instead you have that SDR open an opportunity, go find the other members of the buying group that are in your data already, probably, and qualify an opportunity rather than just qualify a lead, you're going to see a tremendous improvement in productivity and much better alignment between sales. Very simple to change and to do. We also see a lot of our clients starting to create opportunities earlier in the process. So if I see that I've got 2 or 3 people from the same organization interested in the same solution on my website at the same time, I create an opportunity that contains all 3 of those. And when I see that they've done enough things to make them ready for a human being, then I send that opportunity off to the SDR, to the sales team. Some of our clients are going as far as saying, you know, we're using intent data, and intent data is helping us focus our digital spend. It's helping us understand which of our accounts are actually in market. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an opportunity when we see that intent signal. We're going to start marketing to it, and as prospects come into our website, whether they score up as MQLs or they're just inquiries, we're going to connect those leads to our opportunities right away. We're going to convert them and connect them right away. And we even have a number of clients who are saying, we know that we're in a marketplace of 1,000 accounts where we have 3 potential opportunities in each one. So we're going to create an opportunity for each of those 1,000 potential opportunities, or those 1,000 accounts. So we'll have 3,000 potential opportunities. We're going to create those at the beginning of the time, and then we're going to track how we're doing against every one, because we want to know in this relatively small patch that we cover exactly how we're doing against every one of our potential revenue opportunities. Very powerful way. It's not the best way for everybody, but it's a very powerful way to understand how you're doing and what you're going to do. We think this shift to demand units, and so when I say demand unit, you can just hear potential opportunity, right? Or opportunity itself. As an organization, you'll become much more efficient. As a marketing organization, you'll not only be more efficient, but now you'll be talking about the same thing that your sales organization wants. This is the key to being aligned with your sales organization, is to stop talking about leads and to start talking about opportunities. The other really critical thing for marketing is, look, you don't get credit. If you get 10 people from a great organization coming to your website next week, the best you can hope for is getting credit for one of those people. But you've influenced 10 different people. We want you to get credit for that, and we want to understand what that's doing, how that's influencing the creation of opportunities. Sales, you're going to love this most, because now the entire organization is focused on delivering to you what you've wanted all along. And then the customer success team is always working on buying groups. They always have. This is the part of the organization that's probably always been most focused on this. So for the customer success team, we're going to be able to influence the right kinds of people in those organizations at the right time to help you renew those organizations. All right, we've got a bunch of examples from our clients. We won't go through all of those today, but I'm more than happy to talk to folks offline. We also do a lot of projects with our clients to help implement revenue operations in a variety of different ways. It's always got to be for a reason, though, right? So there's got to be a distinct purpose for us to do this, and we'd be happy to help you with that. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the event. It's great to see everybody, and I look forward to talking to you out and about.